Imagine, rain pours down on Hong Kong, footsteps echo in the alleys, and a legendary Jackie Chan runs to save what he holds most dear. But what if one injustice forces him to make a choice that will break your heart? This story is not a movie, but a reality that keeps you in suspense until the last second. The rain pounds down on the streets of Hong Kong, a relentless drumbeat that drowns out everything else. It's a wet, heavy sound, the kind that seeps into your bones. Jackie Chan's breaths come fast and ragged as he runs, his sneakers slapping against the slick pavement. Water splashes up around his ankles, soaking through his socks, but he doesn't care. Behind him, the steady thump of footsteps echoes. 3 sets, maybe more, closing in through the narrow alleys. They're fast, too fast, and the sound cuts through the storm like a warning. This isn't a movie set. There's no director yelling cut, no stunt double waiting in the wings. This is real, and Jackie feels it in every racing beat of his heart. His black hoodie clings to his shoulders, drenched and heavy, the hood pulled low over his face. The neon lights of the city flicker in the puddles he sprints past, casting jagged reflections that blur with every step. He ducks into a side street, the walls closing in tight, the air thick with the smell of wet concrete and street food gone stale. His chest burns, his legs ache, 70 years old, and he's running like he's 30 again. But it's not fear driving him. It's something hotter, something sharper. Anger. A fire that's been smoldering inside him since the moment this nightmare started, though he still doesn't fully understand how it began. In his mind, the question spins like a broken record. How did I get here? Just hours ago, he was at home, the quiet hum of his apartment wrapping around him like a blanket. Now, he's a hunted man, tearing through the night with no time to think. His fingers tighten around something in his pocket, a crumpled piece of paper he hasn't dared to look at again since he found it. He doesn't need to. The words are seared into his brain, each one a punch to the gut. Something's happened, something big, something that's dragged him out of his peaceful life and into this chaos. And it's not just danger. It's personal, a wound that cuts deeper than any fight he's ever faced. Jackie's breath hitches as he rounds a corner, the sound of his pursuers growing louder, their steps splashing through the same puddles he left behind. He can't see them through the sheets of rain, but he knows they're there, relentless shadows in the storm. His mind races, piecing together fragments, a note, a thread, a name he can't shake. Whatever this is, it's not random. It's a trap, a test, a reckoning. And Jackie Chan, the man who spent his life defying odds, isn't about to stop now. Not when the stakes are this high. The rain hasn't let up. Its steady hiss filling the air as Jackie presses himself against the rough, cold wall of a narrow alley. Water drips from the edge of his hood, trickling down his face, mixing with the sweat beading on his skin despite the chill. His chest heaves, each breath a jagged pull of damp air that stings his lungs. He stopped running, for now, but the sound of those footsteps still lingers in his ears, faint but persistent, like a predator circling just out of sight. The alley smells of wet brick and rotting trash, a sour tang that clings to the back of his throat. He's hidden for the moment, tucked behind a rusted dumpster, its metal edges biting into his shoulder as he leans into it. But he's not thinking about the discomfort. His mind is somewhere else, locked on the weight in his hand. His fingers, trembling slightly from the cold and the adrenaline, clutch a soggy, crumpled piece of paper. He doesn't need to unfold it again. The words are burned into him like a brand. They took her. Help, or she dies. Simple. Brutal. A message slipped into his mailbox earlier that night, and signed but unmistakable in its intent. His niece, his brother's daughter, the little girl he swore to protect after her father was gone. She's 19 now, fierce and stubborn. But to Jackie, she's still the toddler who giggled as he swung her in the air, her tiny hands gripping his fingers. The memory hits him hard, a flash of warmth drowned out by the icy dread pooling in his gut. She's family, his last tether to a past he can't let go of, and someone's ripped her away. Jackie's eyes squeeze shut, the rain pattering against his hood like a drum roll to his racing thoughts. He can hear her voice in his head, her laugh, bright and fearless, the way she'd call him Uncle Jackie with that teasing grin. He'd always been her hero, the unbeatable legend who could take on anything. But now he's crouched in the dark, soaked and hunted, his knuckles white around that damn note. The anger's still there, a live wire sparking in his chest, but it's tangled with something else, fear, raw, and unfamiliar. Not for himself. He's faced death too many times to flinch at it. But for her. What if he's too late? What if all his strength, all his years of fighting, mean nothing when it matters most? He forces his eyes open, staring at the blurred outline of his own hand through the downpour. He knows this could be a trap. It reeks of it. The vague note, the chase, the timing. Someone wants him here, cornered and desperate. But retreat isn't an option. It never has been. Inside, two storms collide. The burning need to save her and the gnawing doubt that he's walking into a noose. His breath steadies, slow and deliberate, as resolve hardens in his core. Trap or not, he's going. She's counting on him, and Jackie Chan doesn't break promises. Not to her, not ever. The footsteps are closer now, a faint splash cutting through the rain. Time's up. The rain beats harder now, a relentless roar that fills the night as Jackie trudges toward the edge of the city. His sneakers squelch with every step, waterlogged and heavy, the sound a dull thud against the uneven ground. The storm hasn't just soaked him, it's seeped into his bones, a cold ache that gnaws at his joints. He's not young anymore, and his body knows it, but his mind doesn't care. Ahead, a hulking shadow looms through the downpour, an old warehouse, its rusted walls streaked with grime, the air thick with a metallic tang of wet iron and the sour bite of decay. The wind howls, rattling loose panels on the building, a jagged screech that sets his teeth on edge. He pauses at the entrance, the splintered wooden door creaking as he nudges it open with his shoulder. The noise cuts through the rain like a gunshot, and he freezes listening. Nothing but the storm answers, yet. Inside, the air shifts, heavy with dampness and silence. His footsteps echo faintly on the concrete floor, a slow drip, drip, drip from the leaking roof, marking time like a countdown. His eyes adjust to the dimness, catching the flicker of a single lantern swinging from a beam overhead, its weak light swaying in the draft. Then he hears it, a soft rustle, barely audible over the rain pounding outside. His heart lurches, a sharp jolt that drowns out the ache in his legs. He steps forward, and there she is, his niece, bound to a chair in the center of the cavernous space. Her wrists are tied with coarse rope, her mouth gagged with a strip of cloth, her dark hair plastered to her face from the damp. Her eyes meet his, wide and glistening with tears, and for a moment, Jackie feels the world tilt. She's alive, but barely, her breath shallow, her shoulders trembling. Before he can move, a shadow steps into the light. A man, broad and hulking, his boots scuffing the floor with a deliberate scrape. The lantern catches the glint of a knife in his hand, its blade dull but menacing, held loosely at his side. Jackie's stomach twists, but it's not the weapon that stops him cold. It's the voice, low, gravelly, dripping with mockery. You came for her? Too late, old man. The words hit like a slap, but then the man turns, and the flickering light reveals his face. Jackie knows it instantly. Those sharp cheekbones, that crooked smirk. It's not just some thug. It's Daniel, his old stunt partner from decades ago. A friend who'd shared sweat and laughter on countless sets. A friend who'd turned bitter when Jackie's star rose higher. Who'd vanished after a falling out fueled by jealousy and pride. The betrayal stings worse than the rain. A knife of its own twisting in Jackie's chest. He wants to scream, to demand why, but his throat locks tight. In his mind, the questions explode. How could you do this? After everything we went through, Daniel steps closer to the girl, the knife hovering near her throat, and Jackie's hands curl into fists, nails digging into his palms. The injustice burns, a wildfire raging through him. This isn't just a kidnapping. It's personal, a wound reopened and salted. His niece whimpers, a muffled sound that pierces him, and Daniel laughs, a hollow, cruel bark. You think you're still the hero? Look at her, helpless because of you. The words are a lie, but they cut deep, feeding the guilt Jackie's carried for years, the fear that his fame, his life, has endangered those he loves. He's trapped, not by ropes, but by the weight of this moment, staring down a man he once trusted, a blade inches from the only family he has left. The warehouse hums with tension, the rain outside a constant roar that hammers the rusted roof like 1,000 fists. Inside, the air is thick, heavy with the damp reek of mold and the faint metallic tang of old machinery. Jackie stands frozen, his sneakers rooted to the cracked concrete floor, water still dripping from his soaked hoodie. The lantern swings above, its faint creak a pendulum counting down to something he can't predict. His eyes lock on Daniel, the man he once called a brother, now a stranger with a knife glinting in his hand. The blade hovers near his niece's throat, a whisper away from her skin, and her muffled breaths cut through the silence. Short, ragged, desperate. Jackie's chest tightens, every muscle coiled like a spring, ready to lunge. He's faced danger before, choreographed chaos for the camera, but this is no stunt. His palms sweat despite the cold, his pulse thundering and his ears louder than the storm. Daniel's smirk widens, a cruel slash across his face. "Move!" And she's gone. He growls, his voice rough as gravel, dripping with venom. Jackie's mind races, a storm of its own. I can take him. I've done it 100 times. One step, one strike, it's over. But the knife stops him, its edge catching the lantern's light, a silent threat that pins him in place. His anger surges, a molten wave that burns his throat, but beneath it, guilt gnaws like a rat. She's here because of me. My life, my enemies. He's ready to act, to throw himself at Daniel and damn the consequences when something shifts. A sound, faint choke, not a sob. His niece's shoulders shake, and then it comes again, louder, breaking through the gag. It's not a cry. It's laughter. Jackie blinks, the world tilting as confusion crashes over him. The girl twists her head, spitting the cloth from her mouth with a wet cough. "Uncle Jackie," she says, her voice trembling but sharp, "it's a prank." The words hang in the air, absurd, impossible. Daniel lowers the knife, stepping back with a snort, and rips off a mask Jackie hadn't even noticed, a thin layer of latex that peels away to reveal a familiar grin. It's not Daniel. It's Sam, another old crewmate, one who'd always loved a good gag. The ropes around her wrists fall loose, untied with a flick, and she stands, brushing wet hair from her face, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "We got you." She laughs, the sound bright and cutting, slicing through the dread that's choked him all night. Jackie's breath stops, his heart a stone in his chest. The anger drains, replaced by a hollow ache that spreads like ice. A prank? His mind reels, replaying the note, the chase, the terror. Hours of hell, all fake. He looks at her, the niece he'd die for, giggling like it's a game, and at Sam, clapping his hands like it's a rap on set. The rain outside softens, a dull patter now, but inside, Jackie feels a different storm. Relief should come, but it doesn't. Instead, there's hurt, sharp and deep. They didn't see it, the panic, the memories of loss that clawed at him, the promise he'd nearly killed himself to keep. His fists unclench, hands trembling not from cold but from the weight of it all. They thought they were testing his courage, proving he's still the hero. They didn't know they'd broken something instead. The rain has softened now, no longer a furious roar, but a gentle tap-tap against the warehouse roof, like the last notes of a fading song. Inside, the air hangs heavy, thick with the musty smell of damp concrete and a faint echo of laughter that still lingers. Jackie stands motionless, his soaked hoodie dripping onto the floor, each drop a quiet plink that marks the silence. His niece's voice bounces off the walls, bright and teasing. "Come on, Uncle Jackie, you should have seen your face." While Sam chuckles beside her, his boots scuffing the ground as he shifts his weight. The lantern overhead sways faintly, its creak a soft rhythm in the stillness, casting long shadows that dance across the rusted walls. To them, it's over, a prank pulled off, a story to tell. But for Jackie, the world feels suspended, caught between the chaos he's just endured and the truth unfolding before him. His breath comes slow, deliberate, a steady pull of air that tastes of mildew and relief. His hands, still trembling from the adrenaline, hang loose at his sides, the ache in his knuckles a reminder of how tightly he'd clenched them moments ago. He looks at her, his niece, unbound and grinning, her wet hair clinging to her cheeks, her eyes alight with the same fire he remembers from her childhood. She's safe, alive, not a victim, but the mastermind of this twisted game. Sam claps him on the shoulder, a hearty thump that jars his stiff frame, and says, "You're still the man, Jackie. Never doubted you'd come running." They laugh again, expecting him to join in, to shrug it off like one of his old stunts. But he doesn't. His lips stay pressed tight, his chest a knot of something he can't name. Anger, betrayal, or maybe just exhaustion. In his mind, the storm still rages. They don't get it, he thinks, the words sharp and heavy. They didn't feel the terror that gripped him, the memories that flooded back, his brother's death, the promise he'd made to protect her, the weight of every fight he'd ever won. They didn't see the hours he spent running through the rain, heart pounding, convinced he'd lose her too. To them, it was a test, a playful jab at his legend. To him, it was real, too real. His gaze drops to the floor, tracing the cracks in the concrete. And for a moment, he feels old, worn thin by a night that wasn't supposed to break him. But then she steps closer, her laughter fading, and he hears the shift in her breath, a hitch, a softness. She touches his arm, her fingers warm against his cold skin, and whispers, "I knew you'd come. You always do." That's when it hits him. The knot loosens, the storm quiets. They didn't mean to hurt him. They meant to prove something he'd forgotten. He's still here, still the man who runs toward danger, not away. His eyes lift, meeting hers, and a faint smile tugs at his lips, slow and hard one. He pulls her into a hug, her damp hair pressing against his cheek, and the ache in his chest turns warm. "I'm not done," he tells himself, the thought steady as a heartbeat. Not yet. The rain outside fades to a drizzle, a soft murmur against the night, and he steps back, nodding at Sam. "You got me," he says aloud, voice rough but alive. Then he walks out, the sound of his steps firm against the wet ground. Not broken, but stronger, a hero still standing tall.